Hey guys, so I'm using my Zoom to record this today. I'm pretending that you're not here, so we're gonna do it like again, okay? All right, imagine you are on this roller coaster. I love roller coasters. So imagine you're on this roller coaster and you are this guy like right here, and that's your head, and on your head is this red helmet because you're crazy like that. You're so weird. And on your helmet, there is a 2x4 that goes all the way to the front and all the way to the back. 2x4 is like a big wooden plank, right? So like you're so weird. You're wearing this helmet and then attached to this helmet is a 2x4. So it looks something like, I'm gonna try my best to make it straight, like that. And it like almost hits these other people on their heads because, you know, oh well, that's too bad. So you're sitting on this roller coaster and I want you guys to imagine that when you're on this roller coaster, what we're really starting to talk about right now is like slopes. Okay, so you see that line that the 2x4 makes, right? So I want you to just imagine like you get on a roller coaster, you're starting the roller coaster, you see the horizon and you're just sitting, right? So like everybody else is standing and you're sitting and you're so excited. And then you move forward and this 2x4 on your head, as you move forward, I don't have anything awesome. I have this pen. So this 2x4 on your head, as you move forward, you're like, yeah, this is so cool. And then you start going up the roller coaster and you can see right here, the slope of that pen changes, right? And then you're going up the roller coaster and then at the very top, you're like, oh my God. And then you see the horizon, you see the slope right here, the slope is 0. You see the horizon, you're like, oh my God, that's so awesome. Ah! And then you go down the roller coaster and then you see that slope changes. You go down and then on the bottom, you hit 0 again because you're like, oh, okay, I'm like basically sitting and then eventually you start going up again and then you get to the top and then you go down again. So I want you to imagine that. So those little lines, you know, with the pen on top of my head, that's like this red 2x4, okay? So my question to you is, and you should say it out loud when you're doing this. So that slope right there. So is the slope going to be positive, negative, or 0 when you are on this roller coaster and when it goes right here? You're going to have a positive slope because it's going to look something like that. That's the worst line ever. And then what about right here? Huh, did I trick you? Because that's positive too. See, when you draw, if you were sitting there and you draw that line, that tangent line, it would be positive slope. Okay. What about when you are right here? Okay, let's think about that. Okay, if I drew a tangent line, like something like that, that's what the 2x4 would do, right? That's a negative slope, right? Negative. Okay, what about right here? Well, right here you have a 0 slope. All right, what about right here? You have a 0 slope on your head. Okay, what about right here? Well, that's not positive or negative and it's not 0. This would be undefined. You would have an undefined slope right there, okay? So that's my little example of what you should really be thinking about when you think about these slopes. So when I talk about slope, when I'm talking about increasing or decreasing functions, I'm talking about slope. So I really want you to think about a roller coaster. So imagining, I'm going to take this away. I'm going to use another, you know, well, really, we're going to start looking at the notes. So looking at the notes, here is our pink roller coaster. Okay, so draw this if you didn't draw it already, but most of you did. So in our pink roller coaster, we have, we get on the roller coaster and then we go straight. And then if this was a real coaster, what would happen? You would break your freaking neck. That's what would happen because you're going along perfectly like horizontal and then like boom, obviously, like not obviously, but all of a sudden you're super positive. So right here, there's no slope. So anytime something weird happens on that roller coaster where like basically you're gonna die, that means there's no slope, okay? So right here, this is an end point. There's no before. Like you magically got onto this roller coaster here. So there is no slope right here. You magically disappeared from the roller coaster right here. There's no slope right there. So no slope because your neck breaks. And then there's a slope until here, and there's no slope here because it's like a black hole. It doesn't exist. So you're going down the roller coaster. You're like, yay, and then you disappear. So there's no slope there, okay? And then you go back up the roller coaster, and then you're at the very top, and then you come back down the roller coaster. Okay, so make sure you have all this drawn. And then I'm going to go through and explain why these are the answers again, okay? So for the first question, this is the first two, how about that? Pretty simple stuff for the first one. What is f of 0? What's the y value at 0? It's 3. What's the y value at pi? It is, well, it would be -3, but it doesn't exist because it's a hole. It's a black hole, okay? What about at 4 pi? At 4 pi, your y value is -3. And then what about at 1.5 pi? 1.5 pi right here, your y value is 0. So that's why there's 0, okay? What is the domain and range of this possible function? So the domain goes from left to right. I look at it, where does the pink exist basically? Well, there's a point here, so it exists all the way until pi, and then pi doesn't exist. So we are inclusive of the -3 pi over 2 all the way to pi, and then we skip over the pi because there's a hole there. And then we go all the way to the right, all the way to 4 pi, and 4 pi exists as an x value. There's a point there, so we have a bracket. Okay, so from left to right, there's two intervals. There's one here, and there's one here. Okay, the range is trickier. So the range, instead of looking from left to right, you have to look from bottom up. But for range, it's trickier because it's all like spread out. So what you want to do as a trick is you want to pretend that all of this pink highlighter is like pink sand, okay? So if you take the sand and you very, very gently squeeze it together onto that y-axis. So pretend that I could just like very gently and easily squeeze it onto the y-axis. And then you ask yourself, you imagine all of that sand on the y-axis and you go, okay, where does it exist on the y-axis from bottom to top? So does it exist right here? Oh, there's a hole there. But this one, when I scooped it over, this point filled in this hole and I scooped it over, and now there should be pink sand over here at -3. So that's why it's -3 with a bracket, and then there's sand all the way until +3 with a bracket, okay? Okay, list the intercepts. So the intercepts is like y-intercepts and x-intercepts. They have to be separate. You have to list both and not just, you can't just be like that. I'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're wrong, okay? So you need to list which ones are y, which ones are x. Okay, for y-intercepts, well, there's one at 0,3. So that's a point, 0,3. And then for x-intercepts, there's on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3 points, and there's an interval where we're literally sitting on the x-intercept. So that's why we have 1, 2, 3 points, right? They match these three. And then I say these are points because you know how points and intervals look very similar, right? This could also be called an interval if these were x values. So I want you to say these are points. And then this interval starts from -3 pi over 2 all the way to -pi over 2. And it includes those points because they're literally on the x-axis. So inclusive with a bracket. Okay. And then the next two questions are interesting. It says, for what values of x is f of x greater than 0? This, we never think about it this way, but you wanna rephrase this in your head, okay? So this is actually, what's f of x? It's basically y. When you say greater than 0, that means positive. So they're asking, when is y positive? So then you look here, what does it mean for y values to be positive? That means that we're above the x-axis. So it's asking, when are we above the x-axis? We're above the x-axis between, and it says, what x values, right? So we're writing intervals. We're above the x-axis here and here. So between -pi over 2 and pi over 2, between 3 pi over 2 and 7 pi over 2. If you say 3.5 pi, that's fine, okay? But these two intervals, and then notice that those intervals are parentheses. They're parentheses because this says greater than 0. So where is y positive? Y isn't positive until you are above the x-axis. Right here, y is 0. So you have to be above it, and then above it over here, and then above it, and then above it over here. So that's why it doesn't include those, okay? For the other question, it says, where is the y value negative? So it's all of these portions on the bottom underneath the x-axis. So one thing that a lot of people do, and it's not right, is they write 2 intervals. But it's not 2 intervals because there's a hole here. So there's 1, 2, 3 intervals. So then you write your 3 interval, where's that? You write your 3 intervals, and you notice that last one with the 4 pi, that's a bracket. So how come we're saying that 4 pi is literally under the x-axis? It's because it is literally, that point is literally under the x-axis, right? So we can't include this, but right below we say that's true, and then we can't include this because it's not a point. So then parentheses, parentheses, skip over, parentheses, parentheses, and then parentheses, bracket. Okay? So there's number 4. Number 5, for what values of x does f of x have positive, negative, or 0 slopes? So when we're thinking, where do we have positive, negative, or 0 slopes? It's where is y increasing? Where are we going up on the roller coaster? We are literally going up the roller coaster here and here. So our first answer for positive slopes is this one and then this one. So from negative pi over 2 to 0, and then from pi all the way to, what is that? 5 pi over 2. But you're only increasing after you leave this point because there's no slope there. So you have to have a positive slope. So you have to have a slope after you leave that point. And then you're only positive slope before you get to this point. Because at this point, you don't have a positive slope. You have a 0 slope. So from here to here, from here to here, but those are both parentheses. Where do you have a negative slope? Well, that's when you are falling down. Well, you're not falling, but you're going down the roller coaster here, and you're going down the roller coaster here. So one interval, another interval. Again, you can't include this one because it's a 0 slope. You can't include this one because it's a 0 slope. You can't include this because it's not a point, and you can't include this because there's no slope. So that's why those also have parentheses. Okay, now it says, what about 0 slope? So for 0 slope, I have 2 times when I'm 0 slope at the top of my roller coasters, right? So I'm sitting and the 2x4 on my head is horizontal here and here. So those 2 points specifically. And then I would have a 0 slope here, except there's no slope, it's a black hole, okay? And then also this piece, right? Because this has a 0 slope. So this is an interval from here to here. But see how these don't have slopes? So it's just in between. So you can see for my answer, I have 2 points. I have to specify those are points. And then an interval from basically the same interval, but not including the points because the points themselves don't have slope and they're asking about slope. So like a lot of technicalities, I realize that, okay? Okay, the last 2 are easier. So is it a function? You should be able to look at it and be like, yes, it's a function. Why is it a function? Because it passes the vertical line test. All right, done, okay? And then number 7, how many times does y equals -2 pass x? So you think about what is y equals -2? Y equals -2 is a horizontal line that goes through literally y equals -2. So it would pass 1, 2, 3 times. So it passes 3 times. Remind yourself it's because y equals -2 is a line, and then it would literally touch that graph 3 times. So there are your notes for 2.2. I will post your homework and ask questions if you have questions. I'll see you later.